Hi, everyone. My name is Dale Spoonmore. In case introduce me, my wife and I are the creators of From Seed to Spoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about, this is my wife and my family here. This was our backyard 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, we started gardening in an effort to help with anxiety and depression. That's kind of what got us going. And I got a little hooked, and this is what happened a couple years later. So in the process of building this, I was carrying around all these books. I memorized about 20 books by now. Like, I was memorizing all this information, and I realized in the process of doing that I could make a mobile app that could make this a lot easier for the next person that wanted to do that. Because there were apps out there, but they all had issues or things I didn't like about them, or I had to have a combination of apps, or they were ridiculously priced, or they weren't updated. There were all these issues. And as Chase mentioned before, I was trying to find someone to work with me on it. Just a little background on my career. I worked at Lhomme for 8 years before I came to work at SCA. At Lhomme, I did product management and QA. At SCA, I did QA. I did some test automation. I've gotten into that about 3 years ago. I started on that, but I really had no programming experience, or so I thought, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. Now, I did grow up, like as a kid, I was always on a computer building websites, like doing stuff like that, HTML stuff, mostly. So that kind of leads us into this. So this is the app that my wife and I created, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this really. I really want to talk about how I learned to code, because that's really what I want to share today is the steps I took to learn, kind of some of the advice that I want to give for people that want to learn to code, and just some lessons from along the way. So that kind of leads us into here. And there's really 5 steps here that I want to talk about. So the first step is to get inspired. Obviously, my inspiration was the garden. Like, I wanted to build something, right? When I took programming classes in college, the stuff that I was building, it was like rebuilding a calculator or doing something that I just had no interest in. And the way that my brain works, I've got to be interested in something to be effective at all in that thing. If I don't care, then I might as well not even do it. So once I had that interest, that was really what kind of made it to where I was available to take on something like that. And then it was my team. So they were the ones that inspired me to actually do it. And the reason for why I hadn't done it before was, that programming class that I mentioned, I failed that class in college. And that was stuck with me. And I had that kind of weight of, I had made programming this huge mountain that, like, if I wanted to do it, I had to go, like, spend a year learning and do all this stuff. Like, that's kind of what I had made out of it. So that had kind of kept me from doing it. And having these guys at lunch that day to kind of tell me, Dale, just go do it. Like, you can do this. And, that really kind of lit a fire in me. So that's the first step, that you got to get inspired about something. You got to care about what you want to build. Or just care that you want to build something. That's kind of the first step. The second step is to find a mentor. For me, it's been Chase and Luke and Robert and Justin and everyone else on the team that I've had around. Those have all been my mentors that I've reached out to. But you've got to find someone. This right here is a great place to find a mentor. If you're here and you don't have one, find one of us. We'll help you. Like that's how you just reach out. This community is very willing to help. There's all sorts of people on Twitter that will help you. There's a lot of people out there, but you got to have a mentor. And I'll talk about, why here in a little bit. Learning the foundation principles. That's a big step too, because you have to understand the language in order to speak it. You got to go learn those basics of what variables are and how programming works, and I'll talk about that. And I'll go into each of these, so I'll just go ahead and dive in here. So mentors, they're going to guide your learning path. They're going to help you know what you need to be learning. If you're learning something, because there's so much misinformation out there too, and just old information, to where if I didn't have a mentor, Chase has saved me so many hours of doing some example app that is just completely outdated now, or trying to do some date thing, and he's like, hey, just use Moment. Like those type of things that it's saved me so much time. So you have to have someone for that. They're going to answer your questions, but you don't want to go to them immediately for every question. You got to learn how to learn on your own, so Stack Overflow and things like that. But I know that if I get 3 hours deep into a problem and I have no solution and nothing's working, and I've already taken a couple breaks and I can't figure it out, I know I can go to Chase. And having that reassurance in the back of my mind frees me up to go figure out problems instead of worry about if I'm going to figure out the problem, which is how my brain works. That's held me back a lot in my life, and having that helps me a lot. Also, he's there to review my code. So I also know that if I make a mistake, he's going to be there to catch me. So I have freedom just to code and just try things. And and just kind of see how it goes from there. And then lastly, he's there to encourage me. So imposter syndrome is a huge deal, especially with me with that, failed programming class and working in a software company for 12 years and being around programmers and feeling like I wasn't as smart as them and feeling like I wasn't as good. Like that whole thing was with me. And then having him there to encourage me and say, no, man, you're doing a great job, and having that just is really crucial. So the next step is to learn the foundation and principles. And this is where you got to do some work on your own. No matter who your mentor is, this is where you got to go do work. But 2018 is incredibly easy for this now. When I tried to do this 10 years ago, there were books and all this stuff that made no sense to me, and now there are so many resources out there. I'm a very visual learner. I like to learn by watching someone build something and then redo that on my own. So you can use Pluralsight as my favorite. I've watched so many courses on Pluralsight. That's pretty much all I watch now is Pluralsight videos. I'll talk about some specific ones here in a little bit. Code School is a great place where you can actually just go do code. They have little coding assignments. I got bored with it pretty quick because it was, again, code I wasn't interested in, but it only took me a couple weeks to go through like a JavaScript course and get my basics down and understand how loops work and all that kind of stuff that you need to learn. And then YouTube is a great source as well. Wes Boss has a course called JavaScript 30 that has 30 JavaScript challenges that are kind of basic and just teach you something you need to know. Fun Function is a great channel that talks about all sorts of stuff that's related to coding. So I just kind of immersed myself in this world of doing nothing but this kind of stuff. And that kind of leads us into, once I had found my foundation of principles and I knew that I felt like I could build some of these apps and stuff, I then had to figure out what framework I needed to use because I wanted to build something. I wanted to build a mobile app. Well, luckily, we use Angular at SCA for our websites, and Chase told me about Ionic, which is a framework that uses Angular to make it to where you can build an iOS and an Android app from the same code base. So this felt like the most logical choice for me. Ionic did, because I had this whole team behind me of people I could go to if I had any issues. And so that's where I went from there, and I went to the Ionic homepage, or just the Angular homepage is kind of what I started with because I had to learn Angular first. But the point is, whatever framework you want to choose, it should have great documentation behind it, or you're choosing the wrong framework. I mean, all the good ones out there right now have really great documentation behind it. So just go to those websites and just follow that documentation. And they'll usually have videos they link to and stuff. Those websites all link to other great resources. Just immerse yourself in that stuff and just start building. So I went through the Angular Tour of Heroes app probably 8 times, just going through and building it and getting to the point where I was confused and I felt overwhelmed, and then I would go back and I would start at the beginning again. And I would build it again from the beginning. And every time I made it farther and farther until I got to the end and it all made sense. And for me, that was how I was able to learn, was kind of building something, taking it apart, taking a finished code, trying to take it apart or just change it and just see what happens. Like, that's how I learn. The Pluralsight courses I want to recommend, Deborah Kurata, if you want to learn anything Angular, search for her. Her courses are amazing. I've watched every Angular course, and hers are my favorite by far. John Papa has a lot of great content on Pluralsight. He's also on Twitter and Twitch and does a lot of great stuff. And John Somnez has a lot of great courses as well. On YouTube, these are some other channels that I follow. These are specific to Ionic, really. But the point is, whatever you want to learn, there is a whole world of stuff out there of people that want to teach it, and that's their job, is to teach the latest stuff. And literally all they do is learn the newest stuff and then teach it. So they're paid through ads. So it's a great ecosystem, and I had no clue about it before I started learning how to code. So other ways to learn. I want to talk about podcasts, because one of the reasons why we started gardening was so that I wasn't in front of the computer too much. Because when I've done that at other points in my life, it causes problems. My head does not cooperate with the idea of staring at a computer all day. So I need that time outside, doing things in my garden. But whenever I'm really excited to learn something, it's hard to pull me away from the computer. So the way that I kind of help that was with podcasts. So syntax.fm is my favorite podcast. They have a huge backlog of topics. It's Wes Boss, the guy that I mentioned earlier. It's his podcast with Scott Talinsky, another guy that's really good. But what I started doing was, when I went out in the garden, I would listen to these podcasts as I'm doing everything else. So I just immersed myself in this world. I would also follow them on Twitter. So all the people that I found on Pluralsight, or that I found anywhere else, I would follow them on Twitter. That way, if they retweeted something or if they blogged about something, I would see it, and I kind of immerse myself in their world too. So by doing that, it really helped me identify what it was that I needed to be learning. Because again, I had Chase to lean on too, but still there's this whole ecosystem of stuff, and just knowing what tool to use can be an exhaustive task, and that kept me from even doing anything for a long time. And then lastly, all these people that I follow generally have blogs too, so I subscribe to their blogs and I read that stuff, and that helped as well. Another thing I want to mention, these Techlahoma events. I come to a lot of these events. I watch almost all of them on YouTube. Vance, your talk on browser debugging was amazing. Like, there's so many great talks from this group that you can go on the YouTube channel and watch as well. And then if you have any questions, we'll just come to the next meeting and ask the guy, because he's probably here, or ask the person, because they're probably here talking anyway. It's a great place to find a mentor as well. You get exposed to new ways of doing things. I've learned also service worker stuff that Carmen talked about. Like, I knew nothing about service workers, and I come in here and 15 minutes later, like, it's, whoa, like, that's so cool. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you can find by coming to these kind of events. And then you can make connections, especially if you're new to the industry and you don't really know anyone, you can come to these events, start, making friends, meeting people, and it's a way that maybe you could get a job or find one if you're having a hard time finding one. So now I want to talk about some of the lessons I learned. So up until now, I've kind of told you kind of how I learned and what I did. Well, here are the lessons I kind of came away from it with. And the first one is a lot has changed. It's way easier than it was when I first tried to learn how to code, 12 years ago or whenever that was. And the biggest thing is that now these frameworks make things so much easier. So yes, it's daunting when you first come into it because these frameworks seem huge and complicated, but they make it so that whenever I built my app, for example, I could go through the Ionic documentation. They have pre-built examples of everything you would ever want to use: buttons, lists, grids, search boxes, everything. And the code for it's already written, the example. So literally, I copy and paste that code over. I change some labels around. I maybe change the data model and do some things, but that's basically working, right? Now, if I want to do advanced things, now I got to start diving in and whatever, but it's a great way to start. And that's how I was able to get that prototype up in 3 weeks that Chase mentioned. I didn't really do anything special. I was just really good at copying and pasting and knowing where it goes. Like, that's really all, but it gives you a lot of confidence in the beginning, and then it gets that momentum going, and then that leads to my interest being piqued, and then I can live and breathe it without really having a choice, So the next thing is patience and the power of walking away. And again, this ties back into the garden, because whenever I got stuck on a problem in the past, I would force myself, I didn't really have a choice. I would just keep looking at it and spend all day and all night just keep thinking and ruminating on it the whole day. And most of the time, that would not end up being successful. And then from there, you had two choices. It was either come back the next day and try again or kind of give up, right? Well, in the past, I would give up too many times. And now how I approach these kind of situations, or if I can't figure something out, is if I can't figure it out within an hour or two, whatever that kind of time limit I've given myself, I'll get up and I'll walk away. And I'll go do something that uses another part of my brain, something completely mindless, like watering my garden or just doing something I don't have to think about. And then almost every single time, an idea will pop into my head of a way that I could solve that problem, and I'll sprint inside and start coding, and then it'll get me back on track so that's the way I approach these problems now, is you've got to walk away from a problem, and you've got to have patience. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times of walking away, or 2 or 3 days of doing that, but you just have to have patience and have trust in yourself that you're going to be able to figure it out. I mean, we're all smart people. We can figure these things out. It's not rocket science stuff, and there's this whole community of people out there that have probably figured it out. So it's really just how well you can Google, is really what it comes down to. So the next thing that kind of ties into that is don't get stuck. So don't let yourself get stuck for more than a couple hours, before you get up and do that walk away, or you turn to someone for help. In the beginning, especially, I was scared because I didn't want to ask too many questions, so I didn't ask enough questions. So I let myself get stuck on things that I shouldn't have, because finally when I came to Justin, it was one line of code change or one configuration thing that, or Node was the wrong version or something that, like, it was simple, and it wasn't necessarily something I should have known. So I didn't feel silly afterwards, but I felt silly that I didn't go ask before. So make sure that you're not getting stuck on something too long. The next thing is don't obsess over picking your language and your framework. If you're starting out, my recommendation is to figure out what you want to build. So if it's a website or if it's a mobile app or whatever it is, do the research on what frameworks are out there, and then just kind of pick one and go with it, or come to your mentor for advice, but just pick something and go with it. especially if it's JavaScript, the skills that you acquire in that framework are going to translate to the other one. Like, I haven't done much React Native, but I feel confident that if I had to shift my app over to React Native, we could get something out pretty quick. Like, because a lot of these kind of things kind of tie in together, and you don't have to be, the fear of picking something will hold you back from doing something, and don't let that happen. Just pick something and get going on it. And regardless of the framework skills, the JavaScript skills are going to translate across all of them. Another thing is code something every day. Build iteratively. I still struggle with this because I want to, if I can't go build a whole thing, then I don't really want to build it. But you've got to commit yourself to coding a little bit every day. Even in those days that you don't feel like you can, you still have to do a little bit, especially in the beginning. When you're trying to get the syntax down, and you're trying to remember where the semicolon goes and how you open up an object and how JSON is structured, and that kind of, like when you're learning that stuff in the beginning, you've got to do a little bit every day to make it a habit. The next thing is to fight through imposter syndrome. So it's real. You're going to have it. You're going to have times where, I have it with my own code, where I have code that I've written 2 weeks ago, and I go look at it, I'm like, what was I doing there? Like, how was I so smart in that moment? Like, because right now, I don't understand anything I did. And you just gotta fight through that, and just understand you're going to have bad days, and it's okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't know, what you're doing. And then the last thing that I want to talk about as far as lessons learned is that my prior experiences were way more valuable than I realized. So the websites that I mentioned that I built as a kid, like that kind of tinkering on the computer that I did, just trying to poking around the Windows file system, figuring out how things work, looking at System32, just, like doing all that kind of stuff, it all translated into what I do today. So there's all the time like little things popping up that I've got to do in the command prompt, and I have this whole lifetime of skills that make those things natural. So if you're like me and you grew up doing that as a kid, rely on those skills because they're going to help you out. So lastly, I want to kind of leave with this quote, and this is kind of the thing that made me want to build the mobile app, and it was that I have 4 kids, and I started from seed to spoon on election day. And don't worry, I'm not getting political with you guys. It was just my reaction to what I felt going on in the world was I wanted to do something about it. Like, I have 4 kids that are little, and I wanted them to grow up in a world where maybe I could do something to make things a little bit better for them. And for me, the idea was I wanted people to grow food. I felt like if more people grew their own food, for one, they would feel better, and we'd have less of a societal issue right now with, because I feel a lot better when I grow my own food, or just eat local. And I felt like it was really difficult for me to learn. I felt like I could do something to make an impact on the world. And that's what I want to inspire you guys to do, is just do something. Like, we live in a time and an age that is unprecedented for people like us. And what I mean by that is, we have access to, if you get an app into the App Store, that's billions of people that you have a window through your ideas in front of them, and you can help them, right? Like, that's a huge opportunity that has never existed without having to have a lot of money or a lot of power to get through, that's never existed before. And we have this huge opportunity, and you can do something with it. So whatever it is that you believe in, like, this is my thing, right? Like, I want people to grow food, but whatever your thing is, go do something to fix that problem. Like, if there's a problem you see in the world, there's probably software that can do something to make it a little bit better. I haven't found a single problem in my life that software hasn't been able to make a little bit better. Trust me, I go overboard on spreadsheets and algorithms all the time. My wife has to throttle me back because everything has to become a spreadsheet. But the point is that software can fix problems in the world, and we have the power to do that, so go do it. So anyway, does anyone have any questions or anything you want to know more about? We have, I think, a little more time for me to go into questions. Yes?
So one of the things I commonly see people struggle with when you say just do more things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
But what would you see as good objective things to start with to just start making something? Because a lot of people tend to run into this, well, I don't know what to make.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, like, if you want to make something, but you don't know, like, passionate about making something, like, that's a great point. I totally get that. I think my suggestion would be open source community. Like, there's always something that you can dive in and do there. What's the name of the organization? Someone help me out with it. It helps out OKC that does the. No, but they do the code for OKC. Like, Yeah, the Code for OKC, like the Code for America type things. Like there's all these organizations that do coding to help out things. So I just saw last week all those teachers that are running for office right now. They all need websites and stuff. Let's all go help them build websites, you know? Like building my website taught me a lot about CSS, and my app is styled by CSS. My app would not have come about if I hadn't have built that website. At least it wouldn't look as good as it does now, because I learned a lot about CSS in that process. So yes, Jesse.
I'm just going to throw in on that, that you suggested going to mentors, like for the technical parts of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to suggest that if you jump in the Techlahoma forums, or if you find folks that are willing to mentor you, it's not weird in other communities, like art communities and music communities, to have these kinds of discussions, like what should I even build, what should I work on next, with your mentors, right? I guarantee you every person who's passionate about coding has 10 projects and they can only pick one of them. And so if you spend time talking to these folks, just like you recommended, and you hear some of their projects, that's going to get the gears turning for you. And the other suggestion is as lame as it sounds, it's not lame. Sitting down and doing something like a to-do MVC, or something just like, can I even add things and remove things from the list if I wanted to, you know, make a chore calculator. I think that's what you showed, was your chore calculator you built for your family whenever you were testing out your framework. Something very small and very practical that you could play with is also a good starting point. And then the final suggestion is pick something absurd that makes you happy. When my wife was learning how to program, she made a website for cats going to college called Kitty College. So it was just stock pictures of cats and like, you know, playing with yarn 101, and it was just for the sake of having it was you want to learn how to play. Like coding, a certain percentage of it should be mirthful, right? I mean, it's practical, but it has a lot in common with like learning a musical instrument or learning to paint. You know, you can do it in a utilitarian way, of course, but you can also jam with your friends, and you know, we call those hackathons here, but musicians call it jamming. All these are valid approaches to just getting the fire started.
Yep, agreed.
I would say, if you can't think of something that you want to do something, I don't know. So I made like a chore tracker thing, and it's just super simple. It's like addition, subtraction, and summation. That's it. Keep tracking of the boxes. And I did that, you know, in a day with like Google Firebase. I didn't even code my own servers. Like, you have so many more tools right now. You can do something just to improve your own life a little bit. And it's really just super creative. It doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to do anything. If the purpose is you want to get into it, you want to learn. A lot of times you just jump in and do something, and just make sure it's something fun, though, I would say, or something that you really want to do. Because if it's not something that's fun to you, then you're not going to have motivation to continue doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Any other questions or? Yeah, go ahead.
So you said you spent a few weeks actually building the prototype.
Mm-hmm.
How much time did you spend learning the foundational stuff like Angular and JavaScript and all that other stuff that led up to that?
So it was the end of July whenever I started, like I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. That was when that lunch happened, okay? So then it was August. I dedicated all of August to watching Deborah Carrata over and over on Pluralsight, and that's basically all I did. And then by the end of August, you know, that was around the time that I had that. Then the prototype was real simple. It was one list. Like, here's kind of, so I went, like, the prototype was one of the first things I did, like, early on, where I went and I built that. And then I hit this wall of, oh, well, there's a lot of other stuff I want to do, too. And, like, I got to learn a lot of stuff, too. So then I knew what I needed to learn. And then I went and learned it. In that cycle, I went back and forth and did quite a bit, to where I would go build enough until I got to a wall, and then I knew, okay, I got to go learn all this stuff now. And then I kind of go back and go do 2 or 3, like usually I go in cycles, like 3 to 4 weeks of learning and then 3 to 4 weeks of building. Like that's the way it's worked out so far. Yeah, but that also adjusts the more, like that was in the beginning. Now, like it's maybe a week of learning, and it changes, you know. But so it was August when I started learning, and then we released the first version at the end of December. So from beginning to learn to code to app out was about 4 months. But really, it's the power of the frameworks and stuff that made that so easy. If I would have had to build the grid and all that kind of stuff myself, you know, it would have taken me forever. But it just makes it so easy to just kind of connect these pieces together and understand how they work, and then you've got something. and then you build on top of what you got. And now we're on version 3 of our app, and when we first released, it was pretty basic. It didn't really do much, but now it actually gives you a planting date custom, like this date. These change based on where you live. So it uses the nearest weather station, and it shows you a list of dates that could possibly freeze in your area, and you can choose the percentage of the date that you want to go with. And then it uses that to drive the dates throughout the rest of the app. And now we've got integrations that we're going to be selling things directly through. Like all this stuff, I had no idea. Like this was not the plan. It just kind of happened. So. But you just got to start to get to that point, like, and I still don't know if this is going to be like a money-making thing for us, but at a minimum, I'm doing something to make a difference in the world, and that can sustain you. Because if you're chasing the money, that goal is it never brought me the happiness I was looking for. But I feel like if I'm doing something to try and make a difference, that's a sustainable goal, and so yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. Yeah. Yeah, so Ionic does that for you. So all the code is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or TypeScript, and then it compiles out an Android version and an iOS version using Cordova. So, yes? If I had to, so I would stick with it just because of the ecosystem, so the Angular ecosystem that I'm in at work, right? If I were to do React Native, I would have been on my own a little bit more, and I don't know, I would have had a lot more issues. I don't think I would have got it out as quick, so I don't really regret anything, but I probably am going to rewrite it in React Native at some point soon because we're starting to run into friction against, like every time we add a Cordova plugin, it's a 2-day build catastrophe of why is this broken now, or why is this dependency broken? So the Cordova stuff is pretty fragile. Now they have their own stuff that they're working on now, like they're working on their own framework called Stencil, and their own component system, or their replacement for Cordova called Capacitator. So we'll see, but really, the React Native is huge, and they have this whole ecosystem behind them, and the Ionic framework is starting to slip, like their documentation is starting to slip where things aren't quite right, and you've got to go to, like I rely on the writers for Ionic more than the actual documentation for them now, so that's an indicator. But they've gotten me to a really good point up until now, and I'm going to roll with it for a little bit longer, but so I'm hoping to get the credit card processing and that kind of stuff from selling stuff in the app. Right now I have Amazon links, and I get 8% off of those. But once I'm selling products directly through, I get a much higher percentage of that. I'm hoping I can fund that to potentially bring on help to rewrite the app in React Native and do things like that. So, but yeah, I'm happy with it for now. It's gotten me to where we are, and so far everything we've run into, we haven't been able to. There's always been a way to figure it out. It just takes, those Cordova build issues make you want to pull your hair out, and those Xcode debug errors that are like 8 pages long. And when I first saw it, I wanted to cry because I was like, I have to read through all this. And then now I know where now I know it's always a Cordova plugin. So just go find. So go ahead, yeah.
Why would you have those issues with React?
So React Native actually uses native. Now I'm not as familiar with it, but so with Ionic, it's using a browser control, and it's injecting code to look like a native app. With React Native, it's actually using native code, so it's compiling to native code.
I'll just weigh in on that a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
In the sense that everything you said is true, but every single time there's been an effort to transpile JavaScript to mobile devices, whether it be PhoneGap, all the way up to React Native, which is probably the most recent iteration of this entire technology stack. Every single time it feels like, well, we're about to sail off on this rickety old ship, and then we jiggle the cables, and the billboard's like, woo! Off it goes. React Native, especially at the time that you built this app, you're right, there wasn't as much documentation, but if anyone's like, oh, it's perfectly smooth, there's no problems, that's not true. But it's still better than maintaining 2 code bases and Objective-C and Java and all that kind of stuff. So despite the drawbacks and despite the build challenges, it's still the best thing that we've got.
That's the perfect analogy, because every time we go to build, I am just sweating for days. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to build on this, and then I press the button, I go away for 5 minutes, and I come back, and I'm like, oh, okay. It's so stressful. It's the thing I hate most about programming is trying to build. So, But like there are so many people probably like watching or hearing this right now and like that have gone through like the old like VB6 build things where you got to wait for 20 minutes for it to break. They're just yelling at me because like this is totally like, you know, young people problems or something. But it totally stresses me out. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is Ionic using the AngularJS or the newer, just Angular?
It's on the most recent. It's on Angular 6. It's on Angular 4, I think. Ionic 4 is on Angular 4. They're way past the 2 split, so anything beyond that. So yeah. But like I said, they're trying to shift to Stencil, which is their own thing, which I haven't tried yet. And I don't know if I want to. I think if I'm going to learn something new, I might as well just learn React Native. So, but I'm still, yeah. There's other things I want to do in Ionic first. Like we haven't really hit that friction point to where Ionic isn't working for us yet, and it doesn't make sense for me to rewrite it now quite yet. So that time will come though. Well, if you guys have any other questions later or anything, I'm on Twitter. And also over here on the screenshot, you can see all the information to follow from Seed to Spoon. We do a lot of gardening videos and blog posts and events all throughout the city. We're giving out free seeds at every event we go to. I do free classes for gardening. So if you have any interest in growing food, check it all out there and download the app and let me know what you think. Thanks, everyone.